Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Migrate Your Most Challenging Workloads to Azure with Confidence. Today's webinar is sponsored by Lightbits, Sycomp, and Microsoft, and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I am with Actual Tech Media, and I am truly excited to be your moderator for what promises to be a fascinating, action-packed webinar today. But before we get to today's content, we do have a few housekeeping items you need to know about that'll help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you. So we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can after the presentation. And all questions we can't get to will be followed up on. So if you ask one that doesn't get answered, don't worry. One of these companies will get back to you. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues. If that doesn't work, however, let us know in the Q&A and we will provide further technical assistance. All right, next up in the handouts section of the webinar control panel, that's right next to that questions tab, you'll find that we are offering numerous resources, including 5 downloads and links from Lightbits Labs covering a host of topics on how to work with Lightbits on Azure. So download those now. Those are really important and they are free. Now in the handout section, you'll also find links to the Gorilla Guide Book Club where you can get access to our great printed resources on a vast array of technology topics. In the handout section, you'll also see a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events, some really cool stuff coming up. Check it out if you see something like, hey, sign up today. All right. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handouts section. If you really like reading boring, lawyerly stuff, that is where you would go for that. And finally, one of the great things about today's session and any Actual Tech Media event is the ability and opportunity to ask questions of our expert presenters. Now, to help encourage those questions, we have a special additional prize for you today. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. Now, after the event's over, we'll look at all the questions that come in, pick out the very best one, and we will contact that prize winner. And with all the boring stuff out of the way, let's get to the main event. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters, Abel Gordon, Chief System Architect for Lightbits, Henry Ortiz, a Storage Solutions Architect for Sycomp, and Kishore Shetty, Senior Technical Program Manager for Microsoft. Before we bring them on, let's set the table a little bit, though, for our discussion of the challenge of migrating databases to the public cloud. Now, it's one thing for a company to announce a cloud-first strategy. It's another thing entirely for them to implement it. I think we would all agree with that. Now, the challenge becomes particularly acute when organizations need to upgrade legacy storage arrays that support mission-critical applications. These typically monolithic applications built on Oracle, MySQL, or other databases demand maximum performance and extreme scalability to support thousands of users. They're the reason they bought expensive flash arrays with expensive service contracts in the first place, right? So when the contracts for those arrays come up for renewal, they'll have to decide between keeping its workloads on-prem or migrating them to the cloud. Answering tough questions like these. Can we migrate the storage-intensive workloads to the cloud and still maintain our SLAs? Can we scale performance and capacity for business growth and stay within our budget? Will they have the same availability and data protection in the cloud as on-prem? And how much time and money will we waste if we migrate to the cloud and then have to repatriate back on-prem for SLAs or cost reasons? So let's bring our presenters on today. I think we can agree those are tough questions, and we are going to talk about those issues right now. So if we are all ready, Henry, I think we're going to start with you today.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. A delight to have you here. Henry, in your practice, what do you find spurs most cloud migration projects? So, is it driven by on-prem storage arrays reaching their end of life or by broader cloud first initiatives? Oh, before you start, Henry, I'm going to put up a poll question too. We're going to go through a number of poll questions here to get your feedback on some things. So make sure you answer these while we're talking. Which most accurately describes your cloud strategy is the first one. So sorry about that, Henry. Let me give that to you again. In your practice, what do you find spurs most cloud migration projects? Is it driven by on-prem storage arrays reaching their end of life or by broader cloud-first initiatives?
I would say it's a little of both, but I've seen migrations to the cloud because of customers wanting to archive data to the cloud. They also are using backups, and their backup target is in the cloud. And then there's a shift where customers no longer want to have that long-term investment in hardware, and they're shrinking their data centers. So they go with a OpEx model instead. And then when you are creating a project in the data center, there have been supply chain challenges in the last few years where, especially on networking equipment, it could take 9 months, 6 months out, even a year. So that spurs growth to the cloud. And lastly, there's ransomware, which is on everybody's mind these days. I was at the MGM a couple weeks ago, and they got hit pretty hard. And they're looking for a secondary site to have in the cloud.
Absolutely. The fallout, of course, of that is still going on too, and will be for some time. Okay, let's follow up on that. Which workloads, Henry, are your customers not migrating to the cloud, and why? And does that speak to a broader trend? Are there some things you should and should not move to the cloud?
No, not really. I mean, performance is getting better. And then also, if the only reason I would tell a customer not to move to the cloud is if they have a legacy application that can't move to the cloud, or if the customer has no expertise, then we're looking at a managed service, but we could still move them to the cloud, but under a different umbrella.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. All right. Let's get to another poll question before we move to our next section here. And this one is, have you migrated database workloads to the cloud? Let us know what you're doing with that while we turn to Microsoft next. And we're going to bring up Kishore for that. So, Kishore, you have several performance-oriented disk types available on Azure. So how do you break down what you recommend and for which purpose?
Yeah, Keith, I think it's a great question. I think before answering that, I put a little, the kind of an analogy. I'm an fit and fat marathoner. If I go to a shoe store, I will look at different types of shoes. Some shoes are marked for running shoes. So, but underlying manufacturing factors, if you look at it, it may be a sole characters, it may be its weight as a characteristics, or it could be, it's the synthetic fabric around. That's how we pick the shoes, and the shoe companies categorize them as a running shoe or a walking shoe. Similarly, if you look at Microsoft, we are a platform company. We have so many offerings, but how we categorize them is something called the well architected framework, which means that we categorize them in terms of cost, low, medium, high, the performance in terms of the IOPS or a latency, then the resiliency capabilities, the how they handle the failover. The last one is kind of an security, the security at rest or encryption at rest, things like that. Then we try to see for the most challenging workload how these factors we can apply, and then the benchmark, so that this is the workload. For example, Oracle, premium SSD or ultra disk may fit into because it has these performance requirements or this resilience requirements. Then we specifically for that workload we have different recommendations. Otherwise, we bucket all them into a standard kind of an characteristics, which is we call it as well architected framework, Keith.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. So, Kishore, if your focus is on Oracle, so now we're looking at those using that database, what makes those workloads particularly well suited to shift to the Azure cloud? And second part of that question is, does Microsoft offer storage advice for these specific Oracle databases?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. I think the first one is, I think, my previous, the speaker talked about, the security challenges, scale, OPEX model, and, they can look at, the data being core, bringing on Azure or any other cloud, they can look at digital transformation holistically, data being, the driven and a feed for data science and the AI, upcoming AI. I think that makes a perfect fit of any challenging database which is on premise, a good candidate to be on the cloud. Of course, yes, specifically Oracle, we have benchmarked a couple of our offerings in terms of performance, in terms of latency. We have a very definitive guidelines that includes even Lightbit as an option, because we have certain IOPS, our platform cannot meet that, then we go with the partners like Lightbits. We have a definitive kind of an recommendations for Oracle on Azure storage options, Keith.
Really, really good to know, because there's still a lot of Oracle out there. That is for sure. Okay, let us move on to our next poll question before, right as we get to our next question in the roundtable here. So let us know, what is or was your biggest obstacle to moving database workloads to the cloud? So what is or was your biggest obstacle to moving database workloads to the cloud? Let us know. Give us feedback on that. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it as we turn back to Henry and Sycomp. So Henry, let's talk in broad terms. What are your customers' biggest concerns in this area? Are they afraid of making the wrong storage or VM decision? I mean, these are big, important questions that have to be asked up front.
No, when the customers engage Sycomp, we have a great cloud team, and we definitely look at the customers' workloads, and we give them a very good. We give them a VMs that they need, and we don't oversize it, we don't undersize it. We get it just where they need it, and then also one of the things that the customers basically want a performant environment, and that's what we give them.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever that is, right? You just ask what they need and then provide it. So
exactly.
Okay, great. So in what scenarios, here's a really interesting one. In what scenarios have you recommended against migrating to the cloud, and what were the reasons for that decision?
The only reason that I could come up with was the legacy applications, because they couldn't move it. That's the only reason.
Huh. Okay, interesting.
And then also, one more thing, and the only other reason is customer budget. It depends on cost, and there are a lot of tools in the cloud that can help you with figuring out what the budget's going to be. So customers are a little bit leery of paying that monthly cost versus a yearly, or putting all their money down on a piece of hardware.
Right. Planning up front, as in all things, is such a key then for all of this kind of stuff. Okay, let us now turn to Lightbits and get some feedback from you, Abel. So do you find Lightbits customers are using both public cloud and on-premises storage together in hybrid implementations? And if so, can you give us an example of how that's being done?
Yes, so certainly. I can tell you that one of our first cloud customers was actually an on-prem customer. They were looking into running a very specific application that required very high IOPS and very low latency, specifically tail latency. And they were happy with Lightbits running on-prem because it was actually giving them what they were looking for. But at some point, this company made a kind of global decision to migrate to the public cloud. And that's where they start kind of being concerned about, okay, what we are going to do with this specific workload that's very storage heavy, requires this level of performance. And because they were aware that they can run Lightbits on the public cloud as well, they actually decide to check Lightbits in the public cloud, and then they realize that they get the same user experience that they were having on-prem, but now in the public cloud. So they got a solution that they can start migrating gradually these workloads to the public cloud while still keeping the same user experience. And it's not just about the user experience, also the license model coming from Lightbits was very flexible for them, because from Lightbits perspective, you get the license that is kind of attached to the capacity that you want to support, no matter if you are running it on-prem or in the public cloud. So the same license that you are running on-prem, you can now use, and when you migrate this workload, you start migrating based on the capacity, you can start moving the same licenses to the public cloud. That's basically what simplifies all the transition.
Gotcha. I believe the business buzzword phrase for that is called a win-win, isn't it? So yeah, we see that happening a lot these days. All right, so I'm going to put up the final poll question here while we go over a few more questions. So we want to know, how much Azure high performance storage do you use today? And you see some of the options are UltraDisk Premium SSD V2. So let us know what you are doing with that particular type of storage while we move on to our next question. And this is for, let's see, Kishore and Microsoft. So Kishore, if someone decides they want to switch between Azure storage types, do you have tools to migrate between those storage types? That's an interesting one.
Yes, I think because all those, the products are native offerings, we have very easy switch over from, if customer can start small using, the SSD, and then as they grow the business, they have performance requirement, they can move it to a premium or premium V2. We have a seamless upgrading tools using majorly, the UI tools the customer can handle, or implementer can handle, and switch over it. I think this is seamless here, Keith.
Okay, and seamless is always good. A lot of people wouldn't describe these sorts of processes as seamless in their experience. So the closer you can get to that, I mean, that is music to customers' ears for sure. All right, let's go back to Henry and Sycomp, and I have a question about the migration process. So Henry, how does Sycomp prepare customers for a migration?
Well, we do a inventory and assessment of applications and workloads, and we figure out the business priorities of the customers. You have to work very closely with the customer, because you can't just say, hey, we're going to start migrating this, when the customer's going, no, you can't do that, because most migrations will take an outage. So there will be a cutover period, and you have to schedule that. So working side by side with the customer is key to success.
All right. Is it typically a long process? Is there a lot of planning that goes into it? I imagine there is.
I would say there's more planning on the front end than the actual migration, because you have to make sure that once it's there, what are you going to do with it? And you got to bring it up. So yes, more front end planning than anything else, because you can't plan it up.
Right. Right. Okay. And let's keep you on for another question here. How has Sycomp's cloud architecture and migration consultancy changed over the past few years? And what are you seeing now? What are some of the trends in this area?
Well, we're seeing more organizations they are willing to go cloud first because they have a remote IT workforce and due to the capabilities of virtual cloud environments versus on-prem challenges. So instead of somebody having to do a physical contact with a server, they you don't have to deal with that in the cloud. And I've talked to a few people in the business, and when they're looking for jobs, if they're being told they have to go into a data center, they're a little more hesitant than being able to work remotely. And then we're seeing segregation of responsibilities. This is where an admin who manages an e-commerce environment would not have root or admin access to ERP systems. So we're seeing customers adopt more of a multi-cloud and solution where e-commerce will be on AWS, a Microsoft shop will go to Azure, and Linux shops will go to GCP. And in the long run, it may actually cost you more money and be less secure in a single cloud.
That's wow. Yeah. More money and less secure in a single cloud. So that's going to probably wake a few people up who are on here today. Yeah, for sure. All right, Kishore, let's ask you the same kind of question. What has changed in how your customers are using cloud storage? Obviously, Microsoft is right in the middle of all of this, and you have to follow the trends very closely, and you're right in the middle of all the trends. So what is happening, and where is Microsoft going when it comes to cloud storage these days?
Yeah. Good question, Keith. I think before the cloud storage, I think it is the business, the customer's business is moving towards, the lot of, the changes. I think, the digital transformations, they are in the middle of the digital transformations. We have to look at what they want to do with their data. One is, into machine learning and use kind of an AI capabilities so that their productivity or something, they can improve upon the cost and intelligence. That's a one part. That's why, the data is surrounded by in the Microsoft Azure cloud, you have AI, chat GPT, the lot of capabilities. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at is, as Henry mentioned, the multi-cloud. Each cloud, I think the hybrid cloud or a multi-cloud scenarios, I think Microsoft is the leader where we can have an hybrid architecture where we can control, the workloads of the customer being at Azure, that we can control other things from AWS or a GCP in an architecture, the hybrid architecture. The coming back to the storage, I think it is high performance SAN, and of course, the moving towards more and more performance is the kind of an ask, because a lot of things on premises which are performance heavy because of the hardware, now they are asking the same thing. Okay, through your offerings, you give us the equivalent of that performance on the cloud, Keith.
Yeah, great. And in terms of staying on that topic of planning for migration, what kinds of performance sizers or cost calculators does Microsoft offer for customers who are wanting to move to Azure? Sorry, that was for you, Kishore. Kishore, can you hear me? Was not sure. Am I not coming through? Okay.
You're here, Keith. Maybe I will answer for Kishore.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. So I'm not sure what's happening. Yeah. Thank you.
You're back, Kishore?
Yeah, I got you, Keith.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
There is a certain delay.
Sure. Looks like we're still having some delays here.
Yeah, so Keith, basically, Azure is a great cloud, and they have a lot of TCO and sizing tools. So if you go online, you can go to the Azure pricing, sizing, and you can choose exactly the type of infrastructure that you need, and you can get all the estimations and recommendations that are very helpful.
Yes, I think.
Plan
Can you
for the migration to the cloud.
hear me well?
Yes, I'll tell you what, Kishore, Abel did a great job answering for you, so I'm going to let you off the hook.
Yeah, I think for the Microsoft toolings,
I'll tell you what, Kishore, let's put you on pause for a second because you're having some delays and some issues. It looks like what we're going to do next, though, that was our roundtable discussion, and it was fascinating. So with that, it is now actually time to turn things over to Abel for a presentation on Lightbits. We've been talking about Lightbits all the way through this, and now we're going to find out exactly what Lightbits offers. Abel, you now have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Kit. So I think that we have a great discussion around what requires to migrate workloads to the public cloud, what will be required to migrate workloads to Azure. Kishore was talking about specifically Oracle, storage. Henry was talking about legacy applications. So we see that many workloads are being migrated to the cloud, but there is a big portion of them that are still stuck on-prem. I think that those are the kind of legacy workloads that Henry was referring. And in what we do see that typically these legacy workloads are those storage-intensive applications, a kind of databases, SQL, NoSQL, Oracle, as Kishore was mentioning. And the main reasons that companies still kind of keep these workloads on-prem and don't try to move them into the cloud is because they have concerns and they have challenges, they have obstacles, mostly around storage performance. Is the public cloud infrastructure good enough to give me, the million of IOPS that are used to get on-prem for storage, the hundreds of microseconds latency? What about cost? On-prem, it's very easy to understand how much you are paying for your infrastructure, but when you to move to the public cloud, and as Kishore was mentioning, Azure has a great set of options for storage. But depending on your application, you need to choose the option, and then the cost may not be necessarily predictable. So you do have concerns about expensive infrastructure in the public cloud. Also, scalability it's important because once you move to the public cloud, you also need to understand how you are going to scale. What happens if my application requires more than it used to require, both from capacity and performance perspective. So we do see that specifically the storage intensive workloads are still kind of stuck in the on-prem because of all these challenges. Now, I would like to dig a bit into the details. What's the source for these challenges? Why migrating storage-intensive workloads to the public cloud to Azure may be complex and costly? So if you look at Microsoft Azure, for example, and again, referring to what Kishore was saying, you have standard SSDs, premium SSDs, premium SSD2, Ultra Disk, a great set of options for block storage that match the requirements of different applications. But now if you look at the databases, SQL, NoSQL, you now need to consider, okay, what's the best option for my specific application? You also need to consider the capacity requirements, the performance requirements, okay? If I go with the specific options like Premium B2, Ultra Disk, I also need to specify the provision IOPS that I need, the provision bandwidth. You may not even know that for your application because you run your application, you know that's running perfectly on-prem, but now that I move it to the cloud, why I need to answer this question? How do I know all these attributes, all these parameters? And even if you do know, you are lucky and you know all these numbers, they may change over time. The fact that your application is requiring today 1 million IOPS, will it require it tomorrow? Will it require 1 month from today if the system grows? And what about peak consumption? Okay, maybe it's using 1 million during peak, but in average, it's not really requiring all these million IOPS. You also need to look into the capabilities that you need. You need snapshots. If you need snapshots, also the type of native offerings may change because not all of them have the same snapshots capability. And last but not least, redundancy. Do you need some redundant storage, or you are good with local redundant storage, having all the data in the same availability zone? That will also affect the type of storage options that you need to choose. You also have the option to say, okay, I need a lot of performance, the best throughput, the lowest latency, and you can say, okay, I have virtual machines with local NVMe devices in Azure. Those are great virtual machines. You can use them and you will get the best performance you can get from the public cloud, very, very similar to what you get on-prem. But now the storage is ephemeral, because if these virtual machines goes down, you don't have all the data. And you don't have all the flexibility and all the data services that you expect from the Azure managed the native offering. So I hope I managed to explain why all the transition of these storage-intensive workloads to the public cloud is so complex. And that's exactly what we are solving with Lightbits. With Lightbits, we give a storage solution that removes all these limitations and let you migrate with confidence these storage-intensive applications, SQL, NoSQL database, to Azure in a very easy and flexible way. And how we do all this magic? If you see the diagram in this slide, in the left part, in the bottom, you can see that you have Lightbits software running on LSV3 or LASV3 virtual machine. Those are the Azure virtual machines optimized for storage. It's a great infrastructure. You get a lot of IOPS, millions of IOPS, a very low latency from these virtual machines. So what we do with Lightbits, we pull all these virtual machines together as a cluster that you can now use to provision storage to your applications over your standard network, over your standard VNet in your Azure subscription. So you can see in the top part of the diagram that you have your databases, for example, that just consume block storage volumes, NVMe over TCP volumes, to be more precise, because this is the protocol that we use for Lightbits. And all your reads and writes goes directly to this pool of storage running on the LSV3 or LASV3 virtual machine. And by the way, NVMe over TCP is the fastest remote block storage protocol available today, running on top of standard TCP IP network. You can think about NVMe over TCP, I would say, as iSCSI on steroids, or the next generation iSCSI, with all the simplicity of iSCSI, but with much better performance, much better latency, and much better scalability. So this is how we basically bring to our customers the fastest storage available today in Azure. You get all the performance, you get the low latency, consistent low latency. And when I'm talking about consistent low latency, I'm referring to tail latency, not just the average latency. You also get all the flexibility that you need to scale. I was explaining that Lightbits run on these LSV3, LASV3 virtual machines. So you can just add more of these virtual machines to an existing cluster, and you will get more capacity, you will get more performance, very easy to use. And last but not least, as I was kind of referring a bit with an example during our roundtable, the Lightbits license, it's portable. We have an hybrid license model. which means that you take your license that you have on-prem based on capacity, and you can start using it on Azure as you gradually migrate your workloads to the public cloud. Now, if we compare Lightbits to the Azure managed disk available today, you will see that Lightbits is basically a SAN in the cloud. With the Azure managed disk, basically you need to provision and manage each block volume as an individual entity for each of your applications. So each of your applications needs to be aware of the limitations of that specific volume, the performance requirements. If you have specific requirements for IOPS throughput, you also need to consider the cost for the provision IOPS, the provision throughput. You also need to consider the protection levels that you need. And of course, if you need snapshots, clone, how often you are going to take such snapshots, because you are going to pay for that. With Lightbits, what you see in the right side, basically we give you the SAN in the cloud, as I said before. It's a bulk management of your storage. You just pull all these LSP3 virtual machines together, and you get a huge amount of storage that you can provision for your application with all the flexibility. That means that you can provision a few very big volumes to your application, 10 volumes each with 1 million IOPS, or you can just provision thousands of volumes that may be small, and each of them just doing 10K IOPS or 100K IOPS. You have all this bulk, you have all the capacity, you have all the performance, and you decide how to split it, how to provision all these across your applications. You get, even for a few volumes, you can take the maximum performance. You don't need to have or pay for additional fees related to provision IOPS, provision throughput. You can take as many snapshots as you want. You don't pay for the snapshot you are taking. Everything is thin provision, which means that you can basically provision more than the physical capacity of the Lightbits storage. But because Lightbits has auto-scaling capabilities, as you actually start consuming the storage that you provision, you actually start writing data, Lightbits will start scaling automatically, running more virtual machines to provide more capacity and more performance. And if you compare this to the existing Azure managed disk, typically you need to provision in advance, and you're going to pay in advance for how much you provision, even if you are not going to initially consume all the capacity. You know how much you expect to grow, and then you just provision for that. So you are paying not necessarily for what you are using. With Lightbits, you start small and grow as your application scales. And that gives you a much more efficient model from a cost perspective. Now, I was talking a lot about how Lightbits works and how we solve all these challenges with for storage-intensive application. But I would like also to talk a bit about how easy it is to deploy and consume Lightbits on Azure. So basically, Lightbits is a certified solution on the Azure Marketplace. You go to the Azure Marketplace, just search for Lightbits. You will find our offering. Double-click there. We will ask you a set of very simple questions. For example, what's the cluster size that you need? What's the virtual machine you would like to use based on your initial performance and capacity requirements? And that's pretty much a few clicks. And in a few minutes, you will have a Lightbits cluster up and running on your subscription. And it's not just that we are giving this via the marketplace. Also, the model that we use in the marketplace is very user-friendly. We deliver Lightbits as an Azure managed application. What that means is that you have your subscription. The customer has the subscription, running the applications in their own resource groups. And when Lightbits is deployed as a managed application, it's deployed in the same subscription. So all the data resides in the customer subscription, but all the Lightbits resources are deployed in what's called the managed resource group. It's an isolated resource group that customers gives access to Lightbits, and Lightbits can operate the storage for them. With operate, I mean monitoring, supporting, upgrading, all these type of operations that customers typically don't need to deal with and don't expect to deal with them in the public cloud. And they can just continue to be focused on the application side and the provisioning of the storage, the capacity that they have. So it's very flexible and easy to use model. And at the very beginning, I was talking a lot about, performance, million of IOs, throughput, low latency, but I do want to give you some sense of the performance that Lightbits provides. So you can see in this figure how Lightbits performance and latency scales as a function of the load. The load is what you see in the x-axis. It's based on a queue depth. So as you increase the queue, the load increases, scales. You see in the line, the IOPS scaling as you push more load, starting from 500,000 IOPS up to almost 3 million IOPS. And you can see in the bars, the latency. And it's not just the latency. I'm talking about consistent low latency, the tail, the 99 percentile. And you can see that even at very heavy loads, with millions of IOPS, you can get sub-millisecond latency, not something that you will ever see in Azure today. So it's really impressive. Now, all these are kind of synthetic benchmarks, but I would like to invite Kishore to actually talk about a very specific use case for Oracle and compare Lightbits to what you can get for Oracle using the highest performance cloud native offering that's UltraDisk today. So Kishore, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me well now.
Yes, you are with us and we can hear you perfectly. So
yeah, thank you. I think this slide is a very important slide. Even I will not try to go through the exact number. I think what I wanted to convey message is, okay, we have ultra disk which is highly performant, but every of our offerings have our own, like the IOPS in terms of their block and IOPS kind of an upper limit. So can we cover that, the rest of the IOPS? Yes, of course we can scale ultra disk and cover it up. Then we are not doing the right thing. As I earlier said, well architected framework, we want to optimize the cost, we have to give the performance, and we have to be reliable. If I consider that kind of a well architected framework is what we are offering to our customer, that's where Lightbits come into play, wherein it you see that that it increases, I think, close to 12 times the IOPS equivalent of the capacity of an ultra disk, but it reduces the cost. That is very important. Now it is becoming a well architected solution for our customer, having cost under control and meeting the performance. I think this is the message really I wanted to land with. And apart from the number, I think the 12 times the IOPS and the around 7 times the lower cost is, I think, a great, a well architected offerings we want to offer it to the customer. That's where we both are collaborating. Okay, this is the right value we bring it to our customer. Thank you, Abel.
Thank you, Kishore. And I would like also to emphasize, if we are talking a bit about Oracle, is that availability is a critical item. So the redundancy of the storage is a key point here. So with UltraDisk, for example, you only have the option to run in a single availability zone. It's local redundant. Lightbits give you multiple availability zone support, which means that now we do synchronous replication across multiple availability zones, and you get protection also for cases that an entire AC goes down. And this is very important for mission critical workloads such as Oracle. So it's not only about reducing the performance, increasing the performance, reducing your cost. It's also about getting much better redundancy. Now, I also would like to discuss with you and be much more conservative, not just talk about the best case scenarios for Lightbits, but just talk about cloud storage in general. We did a TCO analysis for one of our e-commerce customers that are running and fully running on Azure, and we look at the spectrum of all the applications that they are running today. Not just the most storage heavy application, but those that are also kind of lightweight from the storage perspective. And we model all these applications that they are running, all the different storage options that they were consuming. They were not using only one option, they were using a mix of all of them. And we did a model that will change all these options just to Lightbits. And we can see that just by doing that, the customer was able to reduce costs by 36%. And this 36% is not just coming from the storage side that was more efficient, it's also related to the compute side. Because once you have a more efficient storage that can push more IOPS and more bandwidth, also the compute that you need can be reduced. If you today, with your single database, can push 1 million IOP, then you don't need 10 of them to get to the 1 million if Lightbits give you only 1 million. I mean, Lightbits give you 1 million for a volume. I run one instance, I get 1 million. The alternative may give you 10K IOPS, 100K IOPS, then you will need to run 10 databases to get such level of performance. So also the compute is being affected. So summarizing, if you are running today on-prem, your workloads, and you are not moving them to the public cloud because you have storage performance concerns, because you have concerns about the costs of the migration, how much you are going to pay for running storage-intensive applications in the public cloud. If you are concerned about the complexity, about choosing the right offering, sizing the IOPS, the throughput, not making any mistakes on the estimation, I will invite you to try Lightbits on Microsoft Azure. You will see that we solve for you all these problems in a very efficient and simple way. And finalizing, before I move back to you, Kit, I would like to invite our audience to go to www.lightbitslabs.com/Azure and request a demo where we will demonstrate all the Lightbits capabilities. So thank you very much for your time, and Kit, back to you.
Hey, thanks so much, Abel. Great stuff there. Really eye-opening for me, especially the performance upgrades and lower latency using Oracle, on Azure. There's going to be there's a lot of consternation, about moving databases to the cloud. It's still there, even though the cloud has been great for databases for some time now. There is still hesitancy, and especially you see it a lot with Oracle because it's considered such a rich and such a dense database. So it's really good to know that people can move their Oracle workloads up there and have even better performance than they expected. That is just going to be very important. I do have some questions. People are really responding and engaged here today. So let's go through some of the Q&A since we have a little bit of time here. So one of our attendees, Darren, says, and any of you who want to take this can, that he asks, another impediment to database migration to cloud is expertise. So if one of you wants to answer that and others that can jump in, that's a real question. Do you have to be an Uber expert to even think about doing this now?
Yeah, I will take that one, Kit. So the expertise are already there on-prem. So the problem is, do you need additional expertise on the public cloud on Azure? If I'm already running my database on-prem, what I do need to know about running database on Azure? And I will say no, because it's a very similar infrastructure with Lightbits specifically. We give you the same kind of SAN experience that you're running on-prem. You move your databases as you do today by just, you're running on a server on-prem, you are now going to run on a virtual machine on Azure. But the storage is going to be the same. You have like a SAN experience, you have your pool of storage, you manage your volumes, you control everything that's going on in the storage in the same way that you do on-prem. So will not require any additional expertise with Lightbits.
Okay, great. All right, let's bring Henry back in here for a question. Henry, the question for Sycomp is if someone asked if they already have data on Azure, where would Sycomp come in to help them optimize their cloud architecture?
Well, we have, thank you, Keith. We have tools that will go in and look at a customer's infrastructure, and we will find out if they're spending too much than they need to spend, or if they over provisioned or are under provisioned. So we can go in and actually look at what they have going on and give them a better solution if it's off balance, so to speak.
Gotcha. Kishore, I want to ask you this particular one, and the other two can weigh in if they would like, because this is something that's on everyone's mind now. So one of the questions that just came in is, how is the growth of AI changing cloud migration strategies? I might rephrase that to say, at this point, is AI really affecting cloud migration strategies? So answer it kind of however you want, but Kishore, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think definitely, Keith. It's an interesting phase we are in. Every facets of the cloud aspect is changing with AI. The cloud migration, I think I connect the dots. I think previously there was a question for Abel about the skill, and I think you look at it now. We have a Chat GPT, and you can ask, okay, I have to migrate my Oracle to Azure using Lightbits. It starts pulling out the right guidance. I think that's the kind of an AI capabilities to optimize the productivity of the people, of the organization. I think that is the key thing Microsoft is focusing. And other side, the business side, I think every aspect of the applications, every data is fed to an the AI driven kind of an process, or everything going forward have one or the other flavor of the AI into that. I think any database, including Oracle, I think they are open to embrace that. I think that's the key thing, one of the key factor. I think Oracle, Microsoft coming together, of course, taking the help of Lightbits to provide that performance so that we can meet a AI kind of an requirement, Keith.
Great. Don't know if either of the others would like to weigh in at this point or not, or should we just move on to the next one? No. The answer comes from silence. All right, that works for me. We do have time for one more question, I think, before we start wrapping up today. And this one is for Lightbits. So costs are driving potential customers' decision to shift workloads to Azure. So the question is, how does Lightbits storage cost compare to the other storage options that are out there?
That's a great question. So in short, Lightbits give you lower cost and more predictable cost. And that's because of the way that Lightbits work. As I was presenting before, when you run Lightbits, basically you allocate a set of compute virtual machines, the LSP3, the LASP3 virtual machines. So you know exactly how much you are going to pay for the infrastructure. It's these virtual machines and, of course, the Lightbits license as well, and that's it. You don't need now to deal with, okay, what happens if I provision more volumes? What happens if I need to provision more IOPS? What happens if I need to provision more throughput? What happens if I start taking more snapshots? All these with the alternatives you are going to pay for fees for that. And one more important item is related to SIEM provision and data reduction, that we give you more value from the infrastructure. The alternatives are typically SIG provision. As I was trying to explain during the presentation, you basically provision for what you expect you will consume moving forward, even if you don't utilize all of these at the very beginning. You need to understand what you will need, and you will start paying for that. With Lightbits, because it's a SIEM provision system, you can provision more than you actually allocate, and let Lightbits auto-scale and you actually start consuming storage. So you can provision terabytes of volumes, start with small cluster with a few terabytes while you provision hundreds of terabytes, and then let Lightbits auto-scale. As you start writing more data and you start consuming the storage, we will automatically add more virtual machines and add the capacity based on what you need. So you are not over-provision the system. And I think that the over-provision was one of the items that Henry was referring to. And that's why they are working hard to find the right sizing and try to minimize this over-provision, because by the end it's cost. And this is one of the key reasons why Lightbits is more cost efficient than the alternative.
That makes so much sense. Start small, right? Dip a toe into that pool rather than diving in and maybe getting in over your head, if you want to use an analogy, right? You start at the level that's not going to break you, and then you build up as necessary. I think that makes just so much sense. And folks, we are out of time today. This was so much fun to have Lightbits and Sycomp and Microsoft on today. I want to thank our presenters for being here, for this knowledge that you presented, for the presentation, for the roundtable discussion. We've just covered so much and had such a great time. At least I know I have, and I hope you have too. So Abel and Henry and Kishore, who is somewhere out there in the Ethernet, having connection problems, but it was great to have him on here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Take
care, everybody.
Absolutely. Okay, folks, we are out of time now. We're going to get you back to your day. But before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business to conduct, and it is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. As I mentioned at the beginning, you do have to be present for the entire event to be eligible. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card for this event is Frank Streller from California. Congratulations to you, Frank. We will be in touch to get you your card ASAP. And with that, everyone, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Lightbits, Sycomp, and Microsoft for making this fun and exciting event possible. So much was happening. It was just a delight to be here, and it was great to have all of you joining us, for attending and for your great questions, for your engagement and interest in the topic. It was just such a pleasure to be with you today. And thanks for being here. And hopefully we'll see you in the next one. So that concludes today's event now. Have a great rest of your day.